Welcome into the Fantasy Football Diagnostics Podcast, where we provide you with your weekly diagnosis of everything fantasy football. Whether it's season-long leagues, dynasty, DFS, or sometimes even IDP, we got you covered all year long. What's good? You know the vibes. Jon Jeune here at the real Jon Jeune _FF, and I am back with another episode of the Fantasy Football Diagnostics Podcast. Welcome in, y'all. It's Tuesday, October 7, 2025, and this is the Week 6 Waiver Show. Guys, we are almost more than halfway through. We're almost halfway through. I shouldn't say more than halfway. We're almost halfway through the fantasy football regular season. It's crunch time, y'all. So, bye weeks have already started coming. Injuries are full in effect. So this is the time, and we can't get complacent. We got to stay locked in. You think your team is great, and that's just when, the next, the next set of adversity comes and gets you. Right. So you just got to stay locked in. You can't be like, oh, my team is so good, I don't need these bench players, or I don't need these players that are never going to play for me, because you never know what's going to happen. Right. And also, you never know. You could end up trading these guys, creating a super team. Right. That's how fantasy is really won. Right. Like, and with a lot of the information that's out there available, it's probably even harder to pull off some of these trades, right? Because a sell high candidate, everybody's, groupthink is huge in the fantasy community. So if anyone's like reading an article or following somebody on Twitter, there's a chance that like a lot of the same players get talked about. So my point still remains, though, that like the best and most simplest way to build a super team is to pick up these guys off of waivers, right? Package them and send them over to teams that are in need of talent, and you can upgrade, right? It's the aggregation of marginal gains, right? Like you can upgrade at wide receiver, you can upgrade at running back, you can upgrade your flex, right? So those are the things that I would look to do, especially around this time as we start to enter this part of the season, right? So if you're looking for who to sell, just remember, if you go over to patreon.com/FFDX, you go into you join the Fantasy Football Diagnostics Patreon account or Patreon page, and you join as a member, you will get free access, 100% free access to my weekly cheat sheet. Drops every Tuesday, and that in there has buy, a sell, and a stash, right? And just put it in perspective for y'all. The sell this last week was Alvin Kamara, right? The sell going into week 4 for the week 4 cheat sheet was Alvin Kamara, right? So obviously we've seen how that's been going lately. But just an idea for those of you that maybe are on the fence, because I don't even know what's there to be on the fence about. Not going to cost you anything. You just go and you join as a member, and it's absolutely free. So keep that in mind as we move forward here. But yeah. So that being said, y'all, the Week 6 waiver show. We had some injuries in Week 5 here. Omarion Hampton suffered an ankle injury in Sunday's game. Could end up missing anywhere from no time to about 3 weeks. So this will be one to monitor for sure. Jaylen Warren, who missed Week 4, the trip in London, he looked like a return to practice out of the bye. So he's on track, trending in the positive direction there. Bucky Irving apparently is dealing with a midfoot sprain and a shoulder injury. Could miss another week, maybe 2. So if you are the Bucky Irving manager, or you happen to, basically benefit from Bucky Irving's absence by playing Rachaad White, then you probably got another couple weeks of that. So keep that in mind as we move forward here. Teams on bye this week. We got Houston and we got Minnesota, right? So you start players from those teams, you most likely will not score any points. So don't want to do that. And some housekeeping stuff. Just make sure you are following me at the real Jon Jeune _FF. Make sure you're following the show at FF Diagnostics. Make sure you are subscribed to that YouTube channel or following the app on Apple Podcast, Spotify, Google Play, wherever you get your podcast. Make sure you turn that notification bell on as well so that you can get notifications whenever a new episode drops or whenever we go live here, right? If you're following me on X, we go live off of my off of the at real Jon Jeune _FF account. So you can turn notifications on as there as well to see when it is that we go live. So obviously, the easiest time to know when we go live is Tuesday and Friday, 7 a.m. Eastern. But neither here nor there, just in case you forget, right? We could be that alarm clock for you, just in case you're not up at 7 a.m., right? Anyway, let's jump into quarterbacks. And again, no particular order, right? If you get the cheat sheet that has my top threes, after I've looked into the matchups and all that whatnot, I've crunched all the numbers, done my projections. That'll be week 3. That'll be Tuesday evening in the matchup show. You'll get my top 3 there. If you are a member of the support the show tier, you obviously got the waiver wire article last night, right? So you got a head start on some of this, but so another incentive to go join the support the show tier for $1 a month, where you'll get waiver wire article, you'll get expanded rankings, and then you'll also get access to a Sunday morning Q&A chat. So without further ado, let's jump into the quarterbacks. So no particular order. Let's start with New York Giants quarterback Jackson Dart, available in 61% of Yahoo leagues. Now, he's going up against Philadelphia in week 6. Not an ideal matchup for the rookie quarterback, but he's at home. He's also willing to use his legs, back-to-back games with 50-plus rushing yards, and a Philadelphia defense that allowed an average of 17.5 fantasy points to opposing quarterbacks over their last 3 games. Moving on to a former New York quarterback, my guy, Seattle quarterback Sam Darnold, available 69% of Yahoo leagues. We talked about, obviously Dart last week. We talked about Darnold last week as well. Darnold had his best game of the season in week 5 in what was a shootout with Tampa Bay, and is now set to face off against a Jacksonville defense that, going into Monday Night Football, has allowed the 10th most fantasy points to opposing quarterbacks. Moving on to the next matchup, we've got the LA Rams. Matthew Stafford, available in 37% of Yahoo leagues. Back-to-back games with at least 375 passing yards, 3 touchdowns, and is now set to face off against a Baltimore defense that has allowed the second most fantasy points to opposing quarterbacks over their last 3 games. So Stafford, he's not, the rostership is not, as low as some of these other guys, right? He's only available in 37% of leagues. But if he's out there in your league, right, if you're in a 1 quarterback league, he's probably out there. So, he's the guy that kind of, like, people aren't excited to play him, right? But we love playing Puka. We love playing Devontae Adams. But for some reason, we don't want to play Matthew Stafford. It's like you want to eat the pancakes, but you don't want the syrup. Hey, maybe you're watching out for the calories, but pancakes usually better with a little syrup. Anyway, I digress. But LA Rams quarterback Matthew Stafford definitely this week has a ton of upside in this matchup here. All right, so next up, let's go San Francisco quarterback Mac Jones, available in 96% of Yahoo leagues. Look, Jones has been pretty solid in spot duty with 2 21-point outings over his last 3 games, and now is set to face off against a Tampa Bay defense allowing the 3rd most fantasy points to opposing quarterbacks over their last 3 games. Now, I do want to say that these um, you know, these fantasy points against stats, right, that I'm quoting, this was all before Monday Night Football. So, pending the results of Monday Night Football, once I include the results of those games, that might shuffle some of these matchups a little bit, but just wanted to get a general idea of where these guys sat as we enter, the week 6 waiver show. So trying to get a little better idea going forward here, but these results all, not don't include Monday Night Football. So let's move on to the running back position. That was all we have for quarterbacks. At running back, let's talk about a guy I doubt is available in your leagues, but I just need to say it, do my due diligence and say this. Washington Commanders running back, Corey Krosky Merritt, aka Bill, available in 23% of Yahoo leagues. Look, we talked about Bill in the matchup show. As a guy that you probably could look to play given the bye weeks and his talent, and we were sensing a takeover here, right? I don't know, my spidey senses were tingling. Something was telling me, hey, this guy could be a viable play this week. So that's why we talked about him in the matchup show. So glad if he came through for you. But in terms of waivers, look, I doubt he's available in any of your leagues. I just need to mention him just because people do tend to tilt. They tend to rage drop. So just check your league. Just make sure he's not floating around in waivers, right? Just check, right? Just do me that solid and check. All right, moving on to the next guy on this list. Let's talk Carolina running back Rico Dowdle, and he's available in 42% of Yahoo leagues. That's actually surprisingly more than I thought it would be, given all the timing of the news. I mean, Chuba Hubbard was talked about. He missed practice, I think, Thursday, Friday, so it was trending in that direction. But I feel like people see backup running backs, especially when a name like Rico Dowdle, who I personally, I thought Rico Dowdle was fine last year in Dallas. I thought Dallas should re-sign him, but they obviously got a better deal from Javonte Williams, and they're enjoying that very much right now. But Rico Dowdle, to me, is a guy that has been a solid NFL player, solid NFL running back. At least he was last year, and I didn't see any reason why he couldn't continue that this year. But he filled in admirably for Chuba Hubbard in his spot start, 234 total yards on 26 total touches and a touchdown to be the RB1 on the week. That was pending Monday Night Football, but I still don't think any running back topped him from Monday Night Football. I'm pretty positive of that. So he's in line for another start this week against his former team in the Dallas Cowboys, who have allowed the 5th most PPR points per game to opposing running backs over their last 3 games. Moving on to another backup running back here, but let's talk Pittsburgh running back Kenneth Gainwell, available in 64% of Yahoo leagues. Now, obviously, Pittsburgh was on bye this past week, but they had the Gainwell had the big game in week 4. Warren is back to practice, but as we've seen, this game is totally random. What if Gainwell? You got to think about the range of outcomes, right? Like, what if Gainwell forced to split with his performance? What if Warren isn't 100%, right? So Gainwell is not going to cost you anything, but also if you are the Warren manager, I would prioritize adding Gainwell if you hadn't done that already. Moving on to this LA Chargers situation, we've got Hassan Haskins available in 99% of Yahoo leagues. Now, Haskins split work with Kamani Vidal pretty evenly after Hampton left with the ankle injury, so hard to tell who will truly be the guy. But Haskins profiles as the early down back, and with a matchup against Miami, it's a nice one. They've allowed the 6th most PPR points per game to the opposing running backs over their last 3 games. So all that being said, this looks like a situation here where we don't, very similar to the Arizona situation last week, where we don't really know who will be the guy to take the bulk of the work. It could end up being like a 50-50 split, a 60-40 split. But if you're hurting at running back, you're the Omarion Hampton manager, you want to take your shot on one of these guys because, you've got like a 50-50, 60-40 chance of being right here. All right, let's talk Hassan Haskins' backfield mate in LA Chargers running back Kamani Vidal, available in 100% of Yahoo leagues. And basically, all the same goes for Haskins, or goes for Vidal as it went for Haskins. Um, he profiles as a bit of, pretty much a pass catcher, more of a pass catcher than Haskins. But Jim Harbaugh is going to be useless when it comes to helping us make these determinations. So again, like I said, it's worth a shot adding either of these guys, whether you have Hampton or not. So moving on, let's talk New Orleans running back Kendre Miller, available in 69% of Yahoo leagues. Saw his highest snap share of the season in Week 5. Was not overly productive, but saw double-digit carries for the second week in a row, while also out carrying Alvin Kamara for the first time this year. So Kendre Miller, this I just want to. We're going to talk about that. So we'll talk about him a little bit later, but if there was not a reason to sell before on Alvin Kamara, just look, and I get it, the target totals have increased, right? But Taysom Hill is back, right? And if we know that like this backfield is already a mess, you add Taysom Hill to the mix, and now you've got a guy that is gonna steal rushing opportunities, gonna steal goal line opportunities. And it was easier to stomach all of that with Alvin Kamara, with him getting the receiving work. But if he's not getting that, it makes it a lot tougher out, right? So, look, I have a buddy of mine who did, in one of his leagues, he did Alvin Kamara straight up for AJ Brown, right? Like, and I think that's a nice trade, right? Because the AJ Brown situation, it's got to get better, right? He's out there, he's running routes, he's complaining about not getting the ball, right? The targets are there, right? They're just not falling. So it's I feel like it's going to turn around for AJ Brown, where for Kamara, I feel like it's getting worse by the week here. So I know I went on a little rant about Kamara when talking about Kendre Miller, but that's just, my thoughts there. But let's talk Arizona running back Michael Carter, available in 61% of Yahoo leagues. Saw 27% of the snaps, 56% of the running back rush attempts, and a near 17% target share. He pretty much operated as the lead back in Arizona, so I'd expect that to continue moving forward unless something changes. Amari DiMarcado, he he had his chance to stake a claim for some stake in this backfield, right? He broke off like a 71-yard touchdown run, or at least what should have been a 71-yard touchdown run. But he did that stupid thing that people do when they drop the ball before the goal line. It's like, why? Why? You're an NFL football player. There's literally like zero reason for you to not take the football into the end zone, right? And it's just like my high school football coach used to say, like, hand the ball to the official. Act like you've been there before. Hand it to the official. If you run into the end zone and you hand the ball to the official, you're free to do whatever you want, right? Or what happened to people that used to celebrate with the ball? Or do they still call you that using the prop? I don't know. But, like, take the ball into the end zone. Take it to the end zone, right? Like, it just makes me so mad that NFL players still do this, right? Like obviously, I'm sure it's getting coached, right? I'm sure, like, there's cut-ups of it, and because it's happened last week too, right? And I don't know if Adonai Mitchell was trying to celebrate when he was doing it. I think looked like he was trying to move the ball so he could, extend it across the goal line. But Amari DiMarcado, like, he dropped it, like, clearly just light as day, dropped it, right? And yeah, I could go on forever about this. But anyway, DiMarcado seemed like he was making a claim for some stake in the backfield. But I think Michael Carter at least has gained like another week or two based off of what happened there with DeMarcado. So, um, you know, I think he's obviously the Arizona running back to target. Zonovan Bam Knight also looked good as well in his limited action. There was a time where there was a point where I thought that he was just gonna, he came in and he was rumbling and, scored a touchdown like almost right away. And I was like, damn, like he might take the job from Michael Carter. But then they never went back to him, which I thought was interesting. But Bam Knight would also be on my radar as well. Um, yeah, now we're in insurance policy range here. So, Bashal Tutin, again, available 47% of Yahoo leagues. Again, his role is too inconsistent at this time to have any true standalone value, but still a high value insurance policy behind the resurgent Travis Etienne. So, how about them Jags, man? How about them Jags? The crazy part is if you've watched this Jags football team, especially that defense, I really thought they were going to beat the Kansas City Chiefs, which they did. They beat the Chiefs, but it was like this is, and I have to admit, man, I said I think what I said, right. There was a coaching changes episode in the offseason, right around the time Liam Cohen was hired, and I was like, I don't know if he's going to be able to get the job done, right. There was like the whole story about how he left Tampa and whatnot, but like. And I was critical of that and the trust factor and the relationships but he's got his players to buy in, right? He's got his players believing they play hard, especially on that defensive side of the ball. Now, if they could just get a better quarterback, I feel like they would be in a better place. Trevor Lawrence has not looked good through 5 weeks, right? So, yeah, I think he's the only thing really, really holding that Jags football team right now because that defense is balling, like absolutely out of their minds, balling right now. All right, let's move on to Tyler Algier, Atlanta running back Tyler Algier, available in 69% of Yahoo leagues. Again, Bijan Robinson's backup had 16 for 51 and a touchdown in week 4 due to some positive game script. Now he's coming off the bye, is probably a bit of a forgotten guy here on the waiver wire, so you can probably acquire him for next to nothing. So if you're the Bijan Robinson manager, do yourself a favor and get insured. Get Tyler Algier. Next up, let's talk New York Jets running back Isaiah Davis, available 95% of Yahoo leagues. Now, Davis was, I know I talked about him. I know there was other people that talked about him as well. Didn't really see the touches that I think, at least I didn't expect, or the touches I expected him to see. But he did see 40% of the snaps, which is telling. He was on the field, right? Just again, didn't get the opportunities. But I think he's, if anything, right, at minimum, he's a backup to Breece Hall, right? And so we see all this work that Breece Hall is getting, all the production Breece Hall's getting. Now, you're not going to get that when you put Isaiah Davis in there, but you're going to get, 80% of it, right? Especially in the passing game as well. So Isaiah Davis adds some value there as well. So, may not have some true standalone value at this time. I still think that will be, that will change in the coming weeks, but he definitely has some, value as an insurance policy. Moving on to LA Rams running back Blake Corum, available in 83% of Yahoo leagues. He had his worst game of the season on Sunday, or on Thursday night football. He had his worst game of the season. I'm just checking to see if that rostership is accurate. Still accurate. 83% of Yahoo leagues. So he had his worst game of the actual regular season. So that was probably a little off-putting, but continues to be the second running back behind Kyron Williams. So obviously we know the value of that role and that offense. So again, a guy that should be rostered in 12-team leagues. Then we look at this next guy on this list. Let's talk Kyle Monungai, available in 95% of Yahoo leagues. Again, not a viable play, but continues to be an insurance policy, running back behind DeAndre Swift here. So, let's move on to the wide receiver position, and let's talk San Francisco wide receiver Kendrick Bourne, available in 96% of Yahoo leagues. Had a massive day in week 5. 10 catches on 11 targets for 142 receiving yards. This was after Ricky Pearsall and Jon Jennings were ruled out, and it became pretty clear that Bourne would be the top target for the 49ers. I know a lot of people were on Demarcus Robinson. Not me. I was on Kendrick Bourne. I had a buddy of mine from high school. He reached out and was asking me, hey, who should I play this week? And I was telling him, I was like, honestly, I really like Kendrick Bourne. Really like Kendrick Bourne. I think the opportunity is great. And so, he came through in a big way. And so if the 49er pass catchers are forced to miss any more time, Bourne could have another week here as a top option in the 49ers pass game, and gets a matchup here against Tampa Bay that's allowed the 12th most PPR points to the position over their last 3 games. Let's move on to the next guy on this list. Let's talk Las Vegas wide receiver Trey Tucker, available in 54% of Yahoo leagues. Had a solid performance in week 5 after a huge letdown in week 4. Has a decent matchup in week 6 against Tennessee, and while he continues to play a full-time role in this offense, he should continue to see opportunities down the field. Moving on to the next guy on this list, let's talk New York Giants wide receiver Wan'Dale Robinson, available 34% of Yahoo leagues, tied for the team lead in targets for the Giants. And with Darius Slayton now dealing with a hamstring injury, could lead to even more targets here for Robinson going forward. Next up, let's talk Denver wide receiver Troy Franklin, available in 70% of Yahoo leagues. 4 of his next 5 matchups are looking real juicy, including a New York Jets defense in week 6 that has allowed the 18th most PPR points to the position over their last 3 games. And that one even probably is a little misleading. I mean, look what Ryan Flanoy just did against that Jets defense. And it's typically, if you look at the production that the Jets have given up to the wide receiver position, it's typically not the number one option, right? Because the number one option is usually, being shadowed by Ahmad Gardner. I'm going to call him Ahmad because he's irking me, but Ahmad Gardner, aka Sauce Gardner of the New York Jets. But when he's following that number one receiver, teams typically tend to attack the second and third options in their passing attack, right? So Troy Franklin, I think, fits that bill. If assuming that Ahmad Gardner is covering Courtland Sutton, then that would leave Troy Franklin to be possibly tried to be covered by Brandon Stevens, who's been, he's not been good. So anyway, I say all that to say Troy Franklin is a solid play. And then, his matchups the next few weeks, he's got Las Vegas, he's got Dallas, he's got the Giants, right? So these are all matchups that I'm licking my chops to get Troy Franklin out there and these other Denver pass catchers here. So, I talked about that last week, but this is, an opportunity here to get against, play a player against those matchups. Moving on to the next guy on this list, let's talk Indianapolis wide receiver Josh Downs, available in 53% of Yahoo leagues. Now, I guess folks have been down on Downs. I didn't realize his rostership was this low, but he had just his second double-digit PPR day of the season this past week through 5 games this season. He's not seeing a ton of yardage, having only eclipsed 30 receiving yards 3 times this year. But playing in a good offense, he will have some useful weeks as we move forward throughout the year. He's probably like a floor option, bye week fill-in guy. Not going to provide a ton of upside week to week, but I think he definitely adds some value here. Let's move to the next guy on this list. Let's talk Denver wide receiver Marvin Mims. Available in 63% of Yahoo leagues. 4 of his next 5 matchups, again, the same as Troy Franklin. It looked real good. New York Jets defense in week 6. Then he's got the rate. I don't remember particularly the order, but I think it's the Jets and then Vegas, then the Giants, then Dallas. But again, all teams that struggle to defend opposing passing attacks, opposing wide receivers, and so Marvin Mims definitely slides in, as well as obviously has the added floor due to his involvement in the running game. So, and we're going to talk about another guy who didn't. I think when I was doing my prep yesterday, I failed to mention him, which is why he's not in the waiver wire article, but I'm going to update that article there if you're a patron. But let's talk a guy coming off of injury. And let's talk Green Bay wide receiver Christian Watson. Available in 94% of Yahoo leagues. Now he's coming off the injury, had the torn ACL, MCL last year. Now, was it an MCL as well? It was just an ACL. So, tore it in week 18 of last season. So they opened up the practice window for him. So obviously with Jaden Reed being injured, they're definitely looking for some other options in the passing game. They also gave him a new contract, earlier this year. So that tells you the confidence they have in him, not just coming off the injury, but what they think he means to their passing game moving forward, right? So it does muddy the waters a little bit because seems like they got a ton of options. They've got all the receivers in the world while also having what feels like no receivers at the same time. But between Romeo Doubs and Matthew Golden and now Christian Watson and Octavian Wicks, Jaden Reed on IR, it's just this list of wide receivers here. But if Watson can provide some value here down the stretch, especially as he gets healthier and these matchups get a little bit, better going forward, I think, being attached to that offense, being attached to Jordan Love is definitely a good thing there. So, all right, let's move on to the next the next position here. Let's talk tight ends, right? And you guys were all over Darren Waller, so the rostership is not that high, but if he's out there, definitely another guy that deserves a look for sure. But I'm going to talk about New York Jets tight end Mason Taylor, available in 87% of Yahoo leagues. Again, another guy that we talked about on the waiver show last week. We didn't talk about him in the matchup show in depth just because he was dealing with an injury. Wasn't sure what his status was going to be, but I did say if he practices fully, I have all the confidence in him. But Mason Taylor available in 87% of Yahoo leagues. We also talked about him in the cheat sheet. He was featured in the cheat sheet. So Taylor had his most productive game to date, catching 9 of 12 targets for 67 receiving yards and a 2-point conversion. He's clearly separating himself as a top 2 option in the New York Jets passing attack behind Garrett Wilson. The matchup isn't great this week against Denver, but it gets significantly better the next couple weeks with Carolina and Cincinnati on deck. And if I just quickly look at my matchup table here, Cincinnati, the top matchup for opposing tight ends over the last 3 weeks, and Carolina, the 7th best matchup for opposing tight ends over the last 3 weeks. So, great options there. And this next guy I was going to talk about, Brenton Strange, right? This is anticipating that he would have a fantastic matchup, a fantastic game against Kansas City. But he actually got injured in that game. So available in 72% of Yahoo leagues. He got injured, did not return with a hip injury. So that's something to definitely monitor. As the week moves forward here. But he's got a matchup coming up with Seattle. If he can go, that Seattle defense, middle of the road against opposing tight ends. But K. Dotton, who's done nothing all year, just had a solid double-digit PPR day. I think it was double digits against them, right? And we're not going to talk about K. Dotton because his role hasn't really been all that consistent. But yeah, it was double digits, 4 for 5 for 81 yards. But uh, you know, K. Dotton, we're not going to talk about right now. Maybe later in the week, we'll see how I feel. But Brenton Strange, if he can go, definitely a solid option here. Moving on, let's talk San Francisco tight end Jake Tonges, available in 96% of Yahoo leagues, coming off an 11 target game, back-to-back games with a touchdown. Tonges might very well benefit from some of the absences in this 49ers passing attack and is set to face off against the Tampa Bay defense, allowing the sixth most PPR points to opposing tight ends over their last 3 weeks. Now, obviously, Tonges has an expiration date here because once George Kittle gets back, you have to assume that Kittle will resume his duties as tight end 1 in San Francisco. But in the meantime, especially with the injuries to the San Francisco passing attack, Tonges makes a ton of sense. I don't know how you know how to say this name. Tonges. I have no idea. Jake from San Fran, not Jake from State Farm. All right, moving on to the next guy on this list. Let's talk Cleveland tight end Harold Fannin Jr., available in 73% of Yahoo leagues. That has plummeted. Now, I've soured so much on Fannin over the last few weeks. If you guys were here week 1, I was like up here with Fannin, and now I'm like right down here with Fannin because the problem is the floor is the ceiling with Fannin. That's my issue. He did score his first touchdown of the season, has yet to duplicate his 9 target outing from week 1. Pittsburgh has allowed the third most PPR points to opposing tight ends over their last 3 games, but I would prefer all the options I've listed above over Harold Fannin Jr. I mean, David Njoku's making a comeback as well, so that just further complicates the Harold Fannin Jr. issue. But who knows, right? You got a rookie quarterback in there with Dylan Gabriel. Maybe he dumps it off to Harold Fannin a little bit more, and we get some of those cheap PPR points. Moving on to the next tight end on this list, let's talk New York Giants tight end Theo Johnson, available in 89% of Yahoo leagues. Had a big PPR day, 6 catches, 33 yards, and 2 touchdowns on 7 targets this past Sunday. 7 targets tied for the team lead. Philadelphia, not a great matchup for opposing tight ends, but it seems that he and Dart have a little bit of rapport. So this could make sense going forward as a streaming option, especially with the touchdown upside, having scored 3 touchdowns in 2 games with Dart under center. So definitely an option, as we move forward here. Next up, let's talk Denver tight end Evan Ingram, available in 52% of Yahoo leagues. Now, he's got back-to-back games with at least 6 targets. He scored a touchdown and saw his first double-digit PPR outing in week 5. Now gets a New York Jets defense that has allowed the 14th most PPR points to the position. Now, Evan Ingram, I think a lot of people were expecting, a lot from him this year coming into the season, but, hasn't really shown that. But I think, these matchups here and are getting a little bit easier for him. And we talked about what Troy Franklin and Marvin Mims have to look forward to. Same applies here for Evan Ingram, right? Dallas, 11th most PPR points to tight ends. Las Vegas, 24th. So not a great there. And the New York Giants, 28th, not great there. But as we know, Evan Ingram, not really a tight end in the traditional sense. He's more of like a big slot receiver. So, if there's going to be opportunities to exploit in that defense, then I think Evan Ingram definitely still applies. Next up, let's talk about a guy that I'm sure we all love talking about. New Orleans tight end Taysom Hill, available in 88% of Yahoo leagues. Like, look, he only played 9 snaps on Sunday. He had 6 rush attempts, right? So I think he also even had a pass attempt, if I'm not mistaken. Did he have a pass attempt? Yeah, he completed 1 pass for 19 yards, right? So He played 9 snaps, and he was involved on 7 plays, right? Either as a ball carrier or a thrower of the football or the passer, right? So, like, how far are we from like a Taysom Hill? Like, this was his first game back, right? So, he had a torn ACL in week 13, right? But he was featured every time he was on the field, right? So, like the Taysom Hill 2 rushing touchdown game is like right around the corner, right? So he makes a ton of sense as a tight end streaming option going forward, right? I mean, I think I might even just put him on my bench, right? Just because like the they're like how far are we from like Alvin Kamara gets banged up, Kendrick Miller gets banged up, and now we're talking about Taysom Hill getting more opportunities in the backfield? Or how far are we from like, oh, Spencer Rattler is banged up, can't play. They don't really trust Tyler Shuck, so then you get a Tyler Shuck, Taysom Hill, like 2-headed monster at quarterback, right? Like those are in the range of outcomes when we're talking about Taysom Hill, and to have that in your tight end slot is like a gold mine here. So I'm not saying cut your current tight end. If you have, if you just picked up a Darren Waller, I would still prefer, to an extent, a Mason Taylor. But if I got to choose between Harold Fannin Jr. and Taysom Hill every week, give me Taysom Hill, right? Like the floor is pretty much the same, right? When you consider the usage, the usage that Fannin is getting. But the ceiling is like astronomically higher with Taysom Hill, just because of the things that can happen between the goal line carries, the fact that he can moonlight at quarterback, right? So like, um, you know, weigh the options here, but Taysom Hill definitely needs to be on your radar if you were looking for a tight end. All right, let's move on to the next. The next thing here would be defense and special teams. So let's move on to that. Let's talk Green Bay defensive special teams, available in 54% of Yahoo leagues, 14.5-point favorites at home against Cincinnati. Now, if you are a patron on the Support the Show tier, then you got the article last night and you were probably savvy enough to go ahead and pick them up because they were on bye, because I know that's what I did. Went and picked them up. They are available 54% of Yahoo leagues. They are 14.5-point favorites at home against Cincinnati. 14.5-point favorites coming off a bye week against the Cincinnati Bengals. If they're not the number one defense on the week, I don't know who is. Moving on, let's talk. I feel bad because I'm picking on Cam Ward, but I'm proud of him. Proud of Cam Ward getting his first win. It don't matter if Arizona delivered to them on a silver platter. I'm just happy for Cam Ward. I really do like the player. I like, he's got a dog mentality in him. So just looking forward to watching him do well in the league, and for him to get his first win, that's huge. But we're going to continue to pick on him. Las Vegas DST available 97% of Yahoo leagues, 5.5-point favorites at home against Tennessee. Yeah. LA Rams DST available 46% of Yahoo leagues, 7.5-point favorites against the Baltimore Ravens, the Cooper Rush-led Baltimore Ravens. That's the expectation, right? Lamar Jackson probably not going to play, most likely going to sit out. The Ravens have a bye week coming up in week 7, so the smart thing to do is probably sit Lamar Jackson this week. You'll essentially sit him for 2 weeks. You will essentially have sat him for 3 weeks in a row, and then he can come back healthy. So I think Cooper Rush makes another start here, and the LA Rams DST should, again, make a huge impact here. All right, let's move on. Let's talk Cleveland DST, available in 41% of Yahoo leagues. This one's a little bit tougher. They are 41% so I say 41% rostered in Yahoo leagues, but they are 5.5 point underdogs against the Pittsburgh Steelers, right? Now, why am I going with Cleveland as 5.5 point underdogs here? Mainly because they are a solid defense, right? They should be able to force get some pressure on Aaron Rodgers. Trust them to be able to defend the run game as well as defend DK Metcalf. So all that being said, they're still a solid play as I see it. So willing to take a shot there if I'm really in need of a defense. So and then last but not least, right, my favorite defense to come on here and talk about, because I talked about them last week and um, they came through with a defensive touchdown. But let's talk the Jacksonville Jaguars, available in 87% of Yahoo leagues. And I got to check to see if the line moved, because they were 1.5 point dogs, but now they're 1.5 point favorites at home against Seattle after their big win against the Kansas City Chiefs. And this defense has had a turnover in every game this year. They had 3+ turnovers in 4 straight games, which was the first time that had been done in NFL history. They did not make it 5 straight games against Kansas City, but I think the one turnover they did have was like the most impactful one, because Devin Lloyd scored, and it basically turned what should have been 7 points, maybe even 3 points for the Chiefs into 7 points for the Jags, right? So as somebody who, did sprinkle a little on the Jags money line yesterday, I was very happy to see that pick 6 there by Devin Lloyd. So again, this defense is legit. Genuinely believe that they're one of the top units in football right now. Getting coached up real good by Anthony Campanelli, who a former coach in the at Don Bosco high school football coach in the Jersey area. I don't really rep Jersey, but I rep Jersey football, Jersey high school football, that is. So, you know, shout out to him and what he's doing. It's great stuff there. But this Jacksonville defense is legit. So, Jordan Lewis calls them Strapsonville. So yeah, really, really a big fan of this Jacksonville defense. And if you've been following this show for a while, there's usually that under the radar defense that like I just gravitate towards. I remember, back in, what was it, 17 or 9 or 18, it was the 49ers. Then there was the Commanders one year. I think that was on the Washington football team. And right now it's Jacksonville. So yeah, I'm all about it. So I teams where I need a defense, I'm probably just gonna pick up Jacksonville and just go from there. Right. So all right, y'all. That is all I have for the waiver show. Again, make sure you tapped in everything I'm doing at the real Jon Jeune _FF at FF Diagnostics. Make sure you're following on YouTube at youtube.com/FFDX. Make sure you're on the Patreon at patreon.com/FFDX. And yeah, y'all, I love doing this. Love being on here with y'all. And make sure you are tapped in on Friday, as we will be covering the matchup show. But until next time, I'll talk to y'all later. Have a good one.